Part 48. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 473. Li Jinghua knew that there must be something going on between Mu Yangling and the Shu family, but seeing that she didn't intend to confide in her, she didn't ask any more questions. Who can have no secrets? As soon as Xiaobeo's 100-day banquet was over, the casino in Linen City was filled with wailing. Although Qi Heiran didn't dare to say anything due to Qi Heiran's power, there were quite a few people crying loudly. But there are also some people who are ecstatic. Those people invested a few taels of silver with the mentality of losing, but in the end they made back 10 times the money. The next day, Qi Heiran and Mu Yangling also asked someone to bring back the money. Their money accounted for a large part of the casino's payment, and they really wanted to renege on their debts. The total of the two of them was nearly 300,000 taels of silver. Fei Bai went to bring the Qi family's guards with him this time, and took out Qi Xiaoyuan's post brightly. That's right, it wasn't Qi Heiran's, but Qi Xiaoyuan's. Who let the casino gamble on the lives of other people's wives and children without permission? It's not bad if people don't care about it. The casino could only reluctantly pay the money to Fei Bai, and the other money, second only to the Qi family, belonged to a guard in the palace. The background of the casino is also not small. They really wanted to talk to the guard, but he didn't show up at all. They just asked someone to come forward to find the boss behind and take the money away. Even if there were a lot of people who lost bets to fill in, but 500,000 taels of silver is still a lot, which is the turnover of their casino for 5 years. Qi Heiran happily gave the money to Mu Yangling, waved his hand and said, "Tell me what you want to buy, and I will buy it for you." Mu Yangling rolled his eyes and said, "That's what you said." Mu Yangling sat cross-legged on the bed, put his share of the money in a box, and said, "I want to buy zhuangzi, and I buy a lot of them." Land. What? Why do you think about buying land all day long? Qi Heiran curled his lips. "Okay, tell Fei Bai to pay attention later, and I'll buy you 2 bigger zhuangzi." With a big smile on Mu Yangling's face, he said, "It will be counted as my dowry." Qi Heiran threw the box aside, and threw her on the bed. "We don't have a family separation, shouldn't all this money have to be included in your dowry?" While speaking, he hurriedly pulled Mu Yangling's skirt. "Oops," Mu Yangling pushed Qi Heiran away, covered his stomach and said, "No, my stomach hurts." Qi Heiran looked at her suspiciously. "Aren't you a liar?" Mu Yangling clutched his stomach and said, "When did I ever lie to you about this? Last time, you lied to me that it's not convenient for me to have intercourse." Seeing that Mu Yangling didn't seem to be lying, he hurriedly jumped out of bed and ran out to ask Mama Wang to find the doctor. Qi Heiran moved too fast, she didn't even have time to stop him. Mu Yangling's face was slightly embarrassed, but in fact, she no longer hurts. It was probably because she avoided Qi Heiran's hand just now and twisted her waist so that her waist cramped. This kind of thing happened before. Qi Heiran made a lot of trouble these 2 days, so she just wanted to take this opportunity to rest for the night. Now that the doctor is here, Qi Heiran will definitely think that she deliberately lied to him, and he will definitely be angry. Mu Yangling pulled the quilt up to cover his head in grief and groaned. Just when he was notified, his servants rushed in and Qi Heiran saw and heard it. He was shocked and threw himself on the quilt carefully, saying, "Aling, your stomach, does it hurt badly? Let me see." Mu Yangling hid in the quilt and thought about it. He didn't know whether he would die sooner if he confessed at this time, or if he could escape death. Just when Mu Yangling was about to break the boat and confess to be lenient, he heard Qi Heiran roar, "Le Shun, hurry up." Wang Ma called, "Why didn't the doctor come?" There was even a hint of shrillness in her voice. Mu Yangling, who was about to lift the quilt, was taken aback for a moment, then grabbed the quilt even tighter, and bit her lips tightly. She decided that even if the doctor said she was fine, she would insist that it was her stomach pain. Chi Heiran couldn't pull off the quilt, but saw Mu Yangling in the quilt trembling slightly, and was even more flustered. He was so anxious that he walked around the room, but she didn't say anything to Mu Yangling, and he didn't dare to force it. The quilt, I'm afraid that Mu Yangling and him will aggravate the internal injury instead. Chi Heiran couldn't help patting his thigh in annoyance, regretting, because Mu Yangling is so strong, sometimes he can easily break free from his embrace, so Chi Heiran habitually rushes over when Mu Yangling is not willing to join him. Using internal strength, this can suppress people. Chi Heiran felt that it was probably because he didn't grasp the strength well today, and his knee was next to her stomach at that time, so it must have hurt the stomach inside, right? When the doctor hurried over, Chi Heiran was already sweating profusely. He didn't have time to complain, so he dragged him to the bedside and asked Mu Yangling to take out his hand to feel the doctor's pulse. In fact, he had already decided to live in the outer courtyard. The doctor will move to the second door, so that it will be faster to find someone. Mu Yangling lay under the quilt, closed his eyes, and finally stretched out a hand as if looking at death. Dr. Sun hurriedly felt his pulse, and frowned slightly for a while. Chi Heiran felt his heart tremble, and asked, "Did you hurt your internal organs?" Dr. Sun was taken aback. He listened carefully to his pulse with his hand that was about to be released, and after a while he said, "Return to fourth master, no internal organs were injured." Chi Heiran let out a breath, and then scolded, "Why are you frowning if you didn't hurt the internal organs? What's wrong with the fourth grandma?" Dr. Sun murmured, "I'm not sure yet." Chi Heiran's eyes widened. Could it be that the one he invited back was not a famous doctor from Linan City, but a Mongolian doctor? Mu Yangling was also taken aback, so she wouldn't think that the doctor guessed what she was thinking, so after hearing Dr. Sun's diagnosis, she lifted the quilt, and she looked at the doctor in confusion. "I'm really sick." "Already? No way, it's just a vape. What kind of disease is this?" Chi Heiran looked at his wife, whose face was flushed because she was under the quilt, and felt sad for a moment. Dr. Sun's argument was obviously that Mu Yangling had some hidden disease, which he hadn't discovered before. Dr. Sun failed to catch the young couple's brain whole, but just stroked his beard and nodded, "It's not confirmed yet, the time is too short, and we have to wait another 7 or 8 days to get a diagnosis. The fourth grandma should rest more recently and ensure nutrition." Dr. Sun glanced at Chi Heiran, who was standing aside with his head down, coughed lightly, and reminded vaguely, "Fourth young master, do you think you want to move to the study to rest these few days?" Chi Heiran stared at him and said, "Master wants to stay with fourth grandma. It's not your turn to take care of this matter, and you can't even confirm a disease. What use are you for?" If it was normal, Chi Heiran would not say such serious words to Dr. Sunday. After all, the two parties are just an employment relationship, not a master and servant like Fei Bai and the others. But now his heartstrings are completely occupied by the thought of Mu Yangling's illness. Still can't diagnose it? Only then did Dr. Sun realize that Chi Heiran seemed to have misunderstood something, and quickly explained, "Fourth son, fourth grandma's days are too short, so I can't confirm whether she is pregnant now, but my pulse just now has a 70% to 80% chance it's Wamai. As long as you give me 7 or 8 days, I will definitely be able to diagnose it." Chi Heiran was taken aback for a moment, and asked blankly, "What did you say?" The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 474. Mu Yangling regretted it to death, and wished that time could go back. If she didn't want to, she would just kick him out of bed instead of yelling that her stomach hurts. After Dr. Sun took the pulse, Chi Heiran invited 2 more doctors. One came to the same conclusion as Dr. Sunday. Of course, Chi Heiran took the initiative to ask the other party, because the other party felt that the slippery pulse reaction was too small. Well, he doesn't know his master very well. If 7 or 8 days after he said it, he was diagnosed as not pregnant, and they all became angry out of embarrassment, then he would not be able to escape the title of quack doctor. So after taking his pulse, he said with a smile, "Don't worry, fourth young master, fourth grandma is fine. She must be tired. Rest for a few days and come see me again." When Chi Heiran heard this, he was annoyed, thinking that he had found a quack doctor. Dr. Sun, who was standing on the side, also knew this old doctor and knew his medical skills well. The most important thing was that if he hadn't been with Mu Yangling, Chi Heiran is very familiar with him, and he would not bring out his uncertain pulse case before, so he asked before Chi Heiran opened his mouth, "Do you think you can rest for a few days before getting a good pulse?" The old doctor glanced at Dr. Sun curiously, thinking that the Chi family was worried about Mu Yangling, so he hired 2 more doctors. He hadn't heard about the fact that Dr. Sun didn't sit in the hall, but came to the Chi family to be a guest. The 2 are not very close and have not been in regular contact. Chi Heiran's eyes lit up when he heard the words, and he looked at the old doctor with piercing eyes. "Yes, how many days do you want to rest?" The old doctor was embarrassed, but Mu Yangling was in good health and didn't need to rest at all. He said that for the sake of the child that might exist in her stomach. After thinking about it, he said, "It's 7 or 8 days, and I don't need to take medicine. Just rest in bed more and keep a happy mood, and the old man will come and show the fourth grandma when the time comes." Seeing Chi Heiran attaching so much importance to it, he thought about it and comforted him, "It's not a big deal, just get more rest." An empty but reassuring sentence. It would have been better if it hadn't been said by the doctor. Mu Yangling leaned on the pillow and looked at the looming figure outside the tent. Only then did Chi Heiran confirm that the old doctor must also have a happy pulse, but it was hard to say it because of the short days. He grinned silly for a while, and told him the diagnosis result of Dr. Sun, and then she asked worriedly, "Before, my wife complained of a stomachache. I don't know if I hit my stomach and affected the fetus. Doctor, please take a closer look." The old doctor was embarrassed, and was about to explain that the diagnosis has not yet been made. Strictly speaking, it is not certain whether it is a fetus. The most important thing is that he did not see any discomfort in Mu Yangling, so he thought for a while and said, "Chinese medicine pays attention to it's about seeing, hearing, and asking, can the old man take a look at fourth grandma's face?" Chi Heiran has no problem at all. The reason why he lowered the tent before was because he was afraid that the door would be open and Mu Yangling would blow the wind. The old doctor met Mu Yangling's round eyes, and Mu Yangling blinked subconsciously. The old doctor smiled slightly. She was still a child. Looking at her ruddy complexion, she was sure that there was nothing wrong with her, so she asked gently, "Fourth grandma just felt a stomachache." Mu Yangling was a little embarrassed, but it's not easy to lie to the doctor at this time, so he said, "It just hurts for a while, it's like a cramp, and it's over in a while." Mu Yangling glanced at Chi Heiran embarrassingly, but he only saw worry on his face, and felt a little bit sorry in his heart, but this feeling turned into resentment after 3 days. After the doctor's careful observation and questioning, he, like Dr. Chi, believed that Mu Yangling was in good health and there was nothing wrong with it. Chi Heiran was still worried, so he invited him to the side room and brought in another doctor. This doctor didn't know whether he was still young or his medical skills were not good. After a long time, he stroked his beard and said that Mu Yangling was worried and ate it. "Take 2 doses of medicine and take more rest." Chi Heiran thought it was the same as the last doctor because he hadn't diagnosed it yet, so he hinted it kindly, but the doctor didn't understand, and only decided that Mu Yangling was overworried. Mu Yangling in the tent curled her lips in disdain. During this period of time, she was almost like Sawan in the Zhuangzi. Where did she feel worried? This man's medical ethics are not very good. As soon as Mu Yangling came to a conclusion, Chi Heiran also reacted. He jumped up and almost yelled, but he was afraid of scaring Mu Yangling, so he could only suppress his temper and invite the doctor out first, and then directly paid the consultation fee drive people away. Neither of the two doctors could find out what was wrong with Mu Yangling. Chi Heiran was relieved, but he still waited for it. When Mu Yangling was still feeling guilty about cheating him, Chi Heiran had already sent all the servants in the yard away. When she called, she specially told Wang Ma to take good care of Mu Yangling and not let her get out of bed if she had nothing to do. This time, Chi Heiran simply kept the old doctor and put a lot of money in the mansion to support him until he was diagnosed. When Mu Yangling heard about it, Chi Heiran was being congratulated in the courtyard, and those who didn't know thought that he had already had a son today. Li Chun smiled Puchi in the room, and said, "Fourth grandma, fourth master is really kind to you." Mu Yangling only felt ashamed, and ordered, "I haven't been diagnosed yet, you go and tell everyone, and don't spread it to the outside world. If anyone is obedient and disobedient, and doesn't listen to me and fourth master, he will leave this yard for me later. Can't afford it? When the beginning of spring frightens, I should bow my head." When Chi Heiran came in, Mu Yangling pulled him and asked him to convey it to the servants again. Chi Heiran said unwillingly, "This is a good thing, and we should let everyone enjoy our joy." Mu Yangling rolled his eyes and said, "If this is diagnosed, I don't mind if you tell the whole world, but this has not been diagnosed. What if it is not? I am not the one who made the joke. By then everyone will know that I want to get pregnant. Crazy, do I still have to go out?" Chi Heiran anxiously said, "Who dares to laugh at you? I see that you are pregnant, the doctor has already told you." Mu Yangling had a headache and said, "What the doctor said is that the diagnosis has not yet been made." Chi Heiran curled his lips, "It's because they are timid." Chi Heiran gently touched Mu Yangling's stomach, and said with a smile, "My son is inside, and I didn't even see it here." Chi Heiran stared at her belly tenderly for a while, then waved his hand and said, "Okay, this matter is settled, let everyone enjoy your joy. You are hungry now, I will call someone cook some meat porridge for you to eat. No matter what, I can't starve my son." Well, the diagnosis has not yet been made here, so he directly assigned the gender of the child. Mu Yangling knew that it would not make sense to reason with him, so he threatened, "If you dare to speak out, I will go on a hunger strike." Chi Heiran nodded with a good temper and said, "Don't worry, I won't talk about it. The subordinates are not allowed to speak out." Chi Heiran continued to nod with a good temper and said, "I'll give the order in a while, be good, don't be angry, I'll go to the kitchen to see how your porridge is doing." Then, Mu Yangling was strictly forbidden to get out of bed, and had been lying on the bed to rest. If she hadn't insisted, washing and eating would have to be done on the bed. Chi Heiran wished he could even go to Gongtang's place with him. In fact, he also followed, and kept guarding outside the curtain, making Mu Yangling angry and unable to vent. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 475. Mu Yangling regretted it to death, because she was detained by Chi Heiran and rested on the bed for 3 days just because she said stomach hurts. Don't let her go out. Chi Heiran walked around the yard guarding Mu Yangling like a hen guarding its chicks. The servants were no longer surprised, they passed by calmly, and when they saluted and greeted, their voices were so soft that they could hardly be heard. This is because when Mu Yangling went out this morning, a little girl saluted happily and loudly. At that time, Mu Yangling was happy that he had finally come out, and looked at the blue sky and white clouds with a little regret, so he was taken aback. Chi Heiran, who stopped her, noticed it immediately, and gave the girl a hard look. He wanted to punish her, but was stared at by his wife again, so he had to reprimand him and sent her away, but he learned how to behave, and tried to keep his voice as low as possible when greeting Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling was powerless to complain about this. She was standing in front of a stone bench, watching Chi Heiran order someone to put 2 cushions on it, and then sat down with Chi Heiran's careful support. Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran worriedly. "When are you going to court?" Chi Heiran said absent-mindedly, "Don't worry, I've asked for leave, I can stay with you at home for a long time, you just need to take care of your health, I will take care of things outside. You are by my side 12 hours a day, when have you taken care of things?" Mu Yangling couldn't help being angry and said, "Take a step back and say, even if I am really pregnant, do you really plan to accompany me like this for 9 months, by my side? I am in better health than my sister-in-law, and I never saw my elder brother so anxious about my sister-in-law at that time. Whether you take a step back or take a step forward, you must be pregnant." Chi Heiran looked at Mu Yangling, who had his brows erect, pursed his lips and said, "Even if I can't accompany you for 9 months, the first 3 months will always be with you by your side. 3 months later, when the fetus is stable, I will go to court." Mu Yangling looked at the cautious Chi Heiran, and her heart suddenly softened. She didn't know whether it was because she was really pregnant, or because she was petted. Her temper became more and more serious, and she talked with Chi Heiran almost 3 times a day. Angry. This should be placed on other men, maybe they had fallen out earlier. Mu Yangling suddenly felt a little guilty, and then his heart softened, and he began to talk to Chi Heiran in a good voice. Li Chun and Guyu were stunned watching. The master is too moody, right? But Chi Heiran felt very happy. Dr. Sun said earlier that pregnant women have unstable tempers, and sometimes they will have some strange movements because of pregnancy. In his opinion, Mu Yangling's temper is now a sign of pregnancy, and suddenly he becomes better again. 100% pregnant. From his point of view, Mu Yangling had a hard time conceiving a child, and it was the dishonesty of the child in her womb that made her change. Chi Heiran felt that even if he wanted to settle the score, he would beat him up after the child came out. So Chi Heiran was not only not angry, but rather happy. Of course, he didn't dare to show it on his face, for fear that Mu Yangling would get angry again. Mu Yangling asked softly, "Then you can't always ask for leave? There are still 5 days before the diagnosis. Why don't you go back to the court first? Anyway, I'm not going anywhere in the courtyard." Chi Heiran shook his head. Mu Yangling continued to persuade him softly, "What are you worried about? Isn't Mama Wang here? She will take good care of me. If it doesn't work, there will be sister-in-law." Chi Heiran continued to shake his head. Mu Yangling put on a face and ordered, "I don't care, you have to go to court tomorrow. If I wake up tomorrow and see you wandering in the yard, I won't eat." Chi Heiran's whole face was wrinkled, and he said, "But I asked the Holy Majesty for 7 days leave, now that I go back, isn't my vacation for nothing? I only look at the results, not the process." Chi Heiran could only sit on the side thinking in distress, and then reluctantly said after a while, "Then you have to promise to rest at home, eat well, and not go out." Mu Yangling responded one by one. At this moment, she was completely relieved. It was nice to rest in bed, and it was nice to be taken care of by others, but if there is always someone around you, you are not allowed to get out of bed, and even open a window to see the scenery outside. If you worry about being blown by the wind, you will not feel happy. After 3 days like this, Mu Yangling felt that it was the limit. The next day Chi Heiran put on court clothes and left the mansion shaking his head, only to find that he was the only one with Fei Bai when he left the mansion, so he asked Director Zhao, "Isn't father going to court?" Although the father and son seldom talk, they leave the house at about the same time every morning. Chi Heiran rides a horse, and Chi Feng rides a carriage. As a son, he has to come forward to ask for safety or something. No wonder he feels that he has done nothing today. "It turned out that I didn't greet my father. Director Zhao, who was asked about it, was a little embarrassed, and said, "Fourth son, the master led the order 4 days ago and followed the officials to the south." Oh, Chi Heiran looked at the sky and suddenly said, "It's already winter." The Ministry of Officials evaluates officials every year. In addition to the scores given by the superiors to their subordinates, they will also be inspected from time to time. The inspections are mainly based on the censors sent by Yashitai, supplemented by officials from the Ministry of Officials. The magistrates are evaluated, and the grades given by Yashitai account for 1/3 of the officials' resumes. It seems that this year, the Holy Emperor named Qi Feng. Qi Heiran curled his lips invisibly. His father hadn't been given such an errand for 5 years, and he didn't know what the emperor meant when he suddenly took this errand. Qi Heiran rode unsteadily towards the palace, thinking wildly at the same time, but soon he didn't have the energy to think about it, because he thought everyone was weird. Before entering the palace, on the avenue, most of the officials he met greeted him, and then looked at him seriously. The adult directly opened the curtain and leaned over to look at him. At first Qi Heiran was still able to deal with it calmly, but after a long time he couldn't maintain the smile on his face, so he simply rode forward without looking sideways. Fei Bai followed behind him, sweating all the time. When he reached the gate of the palace, Qi Heiran threw the horse directly to Fei Bai, and said in a low voice, "Go and find out what happened in the past 3 days when master hasn't come out." Fei Bai complied with a straight face. As soon as Qi Heiran stepped into the hall, there was a pause in the discussion among the officials, and after a while, everyone became lively again, still talking together in 2s and 3s, and some officials stood alone. But Qi Heiran still noticed that many people were staring at him, and some even chatted and laughed with the people around him while looking at him. Standing in the back position, he was about to walk over to inquire about the news, when the sound of cleaning the whip sounded. Qi Heiran had no choice but to find his own position and stand still. After the emperor sat down on it and began to inquire about the government, Qi Heiran slightly raised his head to observe the people in the hall. He didn't know what happened, so he could only speculate from everyone's reactions, and he didn't know if it was the border crossing. Question. For Qi Heiran, what Qi Ziyuan wants to do is to hang a knife above his head, which makes him always fearful, but also full of passion. He feels that as long as this matter is not exposed, no matter what it is, it will be difficult. But he saw that although everyone had different expressions, they didn't feel dignified and taboo, and Qi Heiran was slightly relieved when he introduced this point. He had just loosened his heartstrings when he heard the emperor's curious voice, "Qi Iking, why did you go to court?" The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 476. Everyone swished, and all looked at Qi Heiran. Qi Heiran swallowed invisibly, and replied after consideration, "The year is approaching, and I can't be too lazy, so I returned from vacation." The emperor said very gently, "I and all the ministers and workers understand that there is something wrong with your family. In fact, there is no need to come back in such a hurry." Qi Heiran stared, swallowed, and asked cautiously, "Your Majesty, what's the matter with the minister's family?" "Isn't Iking waiting for his wife's diagnosis at home?" the emperor said depressedly. "After all, this is your first child, so it's okay to pay more attention to it." Qi Heiran couldn't hide his surprise. His eyes widened and he asked, "How did the emperor know?" The emperor frowned, and said in displeasure, "Didn't you write it when you submitted the booklet to ask for leave?" Qi Heiran suddenly shrank his neck and asked, "I wrote it in the notebook." "Impossible," Mu Yangling repeatedly asked him to promise not to tell others. The emperor looked at him like that, thought of the jokes passed back by the dark guards, and knew that he must have lost his head when writing the notes, so he ignored him, waved him back to the team, and then continued to ask about his government affairs. Although the emperor stopped the questioning with Qi Heiran, he still showed the officials another joke. Because the emperor urgently needed manpower to watch over Qin Xiang and his henchmen, most of the people who were watching over the Qi family were transferred back. With insufficient manpower, Qi Heiran naturally didn't get the matter of the inner court immediately. But Qi Heiran first invited 2 doctors into the mansion one after another, and then suddenly asked for leave with the Ministry of War. The hidden guards naturally felt that there was something wrong, so the young doctor who was just kicked out was contacted by the hidden guards. The young doctor was furious because of Qi Heiran's attitude. Naturally, he knew everything and said everything, so the emperor soon knew that Qi Heiran was sure about Mu Yangling's pregnancy before the doctor diagnosed him. For this, he only took it as a joke, and he didn't feel like sharing it with the officials, and he would not do such a thing like lifting a rock to shoot himself in the foot. But Qi Heiran, who was rejected by the Ministry of War in the afternoon, personally submitted the paper and asked the emperor for leave, because the emperor attached great importance to Qi Heiran after he returned to Beijing, and his papers were always the first to appear before the emperor's case. Seeing that the papers were a bit incoherent, the emperor was overjoyed, so he simply approved his leave papers and sent them out as plain papers. The people below watched this joke when they checked and put the booklet into the file. On the second day, when the menstrual event was a few days late, the Mu family hurriedly asked the doctor to ask whether he was pregnant or not. The joke was circulated among the officials. All over. The officials laughed at Qi Heiran's strict control over his wife, not to mention that his wife was not sure about her pregnancy. Even if she was really pregnant, she didn't ask for leave to stay with her at home. Before Shen went to court, everyone was watching Qi Heiran's jokes. Qi Heiran stood in the line with his head drooping, in a bad mood. He didn't expect the news to spread so widely. If Aling found out, would he be so angry? After the morning ceremony, Qi Heiran walked out ignoring everyone. Everyone greeted him with a smile and left, but a few young officials ran up to him to congratulate him. Master Qi, first congratulations here. When the doctor is diagnosed, don't forget to buy us a drink. Qi Heiran's face became more serious, and a small eunuch hurried over and stopped him with a smile. Master Xiao Qi, your Majesty invites you to attend the study. Qi Heiran pouted, and followed the little eunuch to see the emperor. The emperor was practicing calligraphy, and when he saw Qi Heiran drooping his head, he asked amusedly, "What's the matter? How did I hear that you have been so happy these 2 days that you can't find your way?" Qi Heiran bowed to the emperor, stood up and said, "Your Majesty, why did you publish the letter of request for leave? My wife has never allowed me to tell this matter to the public before, but now." The emperor had a more three-dimensional understanding of Qi Heiran's internal fear, so he didn't doubt it, but just laughed and scolded, "Who did you see to send out the cover letter? You are so beautiful." The emperor thought for a while and said, "Since you have asked for leave, you should stay at home and spend time with your family while you still have time." Qi Heiran was taken aback for a moment, and asked cautiously, "Your Majesty, don't you have a lot of time?" The emperor was so angry that he threw him a note, but the accuracy was not enough, and the note flew out of his head. "What nonsense are you talking about? I have an errand for you, and this year will be over, and you will leave Beijing in the beginning of spring, so let's stay at home for the next few days, and avoid the limelight." Qi Heiran's lowered eyes lit up, a big smile appeared on his face, and he knelt down to thank him. He thought he could go back to Jingzhou Mansion at the beginning of spring, but when he thought that Mu Yangling was pregnant, he became worried again. The emperor watched his back disappear, and then looked down at the notebooks. After flipping through a few pages, he was still impatient to read, and asked his servants to carry the things to several veteran officials, and asked them to review them with ink pens. The servant was no stranger to this, and stepped forward to clear the table. The emperor thought for a while and said, "Let's stay in a hurry." The waiter paused slightly, bowed down to answer, and carried down the first base memorial, leaving only a dozen or so papers on the table. As soon as Qi Heiran left the palace, he went to look for Fan Zijian angrily. On the way, he figured it out. Others didn't inform him because they wanted to see a joke. They didn't have a deep friendship, so they had no obligation to inform him, but it didn't make sense for Zijian not to tell him. It made him frightened in vain. This matter can't be finished like this. Chi Heiran ran to look for Fan Zijian, who was shutting himself at home and studying hard. He had to prepare for next year's exam. When he saw Chi Heiran, he was at a loss and asked, "Aren't you going to be a father? Come." When Chi Heiran knew that he was going to be a father, he asked Fei Bai to inform Fan Zijian immediately. In his concept, Fan Zijian was not an outsider. Celebrate, but Fei Bai hinted that there is a doctor living in the mansion, and Chi Heiran wants to take care of Mu Yangling. At first, Fan Zijian thought that Mu Yangling's fetus was unstable, and wanted to go to Chi's mansion, but Fei Bai repeatedly said that Mu Yangling was in good health, but Chi Heiran was worried. Thinking of Chi Heiran's love of Mu Yangling, Fan Zijian thought he understood it, and he was at ease. In addition, after reading a few test papers recently, he felt a little obscure, and he was so anxious that he didn't have the energy to ask questions. At this time, seeing Chi Heiran running over angrily, he thought something serious happened. Chi Heiran angrily expressed his condemnation and contempt for Fan Zijian's behavior of not reporting a joke when he saw it. Fan Zijian looked at him with black lines all over his head, and said faintly, "It turns out that he hasn't been diagnosed yet." Chi Heiran said confidently, "Although the diagnosis has not yet been made, my grandfather knows that Aling is definitely pregnant. In 9 months, I will have a son, ha ha ha." Fan Zijian looked at him speechlessly, and said after a while, "I don't know about this, you don't need to criticize me, I haven't even gone out of the room these days." Chi Heiran put away his smile and asked, "Didn't uncle tell you? This is a big deal for me, and he didn't even mention me." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 477. Fan Zijian curled his lips indifferently and said, "I fell out with him. It's not a big deal for you. He doesn't need to remind me. But you have been on the job for so long, and you still can't talk and do things with your brain. I didn't pay attention to anything, so can I do things like this for my cousin?" Chi Heiran leaned against Fan Zijian curiously. "You and your uncle have been arguing twice for 3 days, but nothing happened. What's the matter this time?" Fan Zijian dropped the book in his hand, lay down halfway on the couch, and said with a smile, "I used to fight with him, but this time I fought with Fan Zixiao directly, and he naturally fell out with me when he became angry from embarrassment." "Did Fan Zixiao provoke you?" Chi Heiran's eyebrows flashed with anger. "We don't have the same knowledge as him, how dare he rush to trouble you?" Fan Zijian saw that Chi Heiran put the blame on Fan Zixiao without even thinking about it, and said with emotion, "This is a good brother, no one in the house trusts me except you, even my mother suspects me." Fan Zijian snorted coldly, "Speaking of which, my brother hasn't made much progress in the past few years, it's just some backyard tricks." "What did he do?" Chi Heiran frowned. "It's nothing. He planted people in my yard a few years ago. This time after I won the exam, he was inevitably panicked when I mentioned Inayan, so he asked a little girl to lure me to Z1. He was having an affair with an aunt of his father's Ina, and when my father came in and saw, he blamed me for the whole thing, saying that I set the blame on me." Fan Zijian glanced at him sideways, and said with a smile, "Actually, he also that's right, the master is just planting the blame, but whether I admit it or not depends on my mood." Chi Heiran was so angry that his nose was crooked. "Why did you follow his plan? Wouldn't it be nice to take this opportunity to let uncle see his true face?" Fan Zijian curled his lips. "It's not the time yet, I still have use for this matter, don't worry about it. Speaking of which, I really thank you. If I hadn't followed you to find my eldest cousin back then, maybe I would have done it now." Slightly higher than Fan Zixiao, Thinking about how to fight them every day, it is so tiring, and a lifetime will be wasted. Although Fan Zijan said so, Chi Heiran didn't feel that he was not hurt at all. After all, he was his biological parents. If he didn't trust him at all, it would be so sad. Anyway, Chi Heiran would definitely very sad. So Chi Heiran didn't leave after leaving Fan Zijan's study room, but went to find Fan Siwen ahead. It happened to be noon at this time. Fan Siwen came back from the yamen for lunch, saw Chi Heiran, a rare smile appeared on his serious face. He beckoned, "Heiran is here, come and have dinner with uncle." Chi Heiran sat at the table, looked left and right, and asked, "Uncle, where is cousin Xiao?" Fan Siwen raised his eyes and glanced at him, and said lightly, "It's rare that you actually called Jiaoyu to be your cousin. I remember that when you were a child, you refused to call Zijan to be your cousin. In order to fight for whoever was older and who was younger beat Zijan, see Jiaoyu, and even call him by first and last name. My nephew has grown up now." Chi Heiran thought for a while and said, "Uncle, cousin Xiao already has writing skills at the age of 14, who doesn't know that you value him, but cousin Zijan is the legitimate son, he has already it's 18, and it's not like my husband has hinted that he wants to get a character for him, but he pretends he didn't hear it. Uncle, when do you want to get a character for him?" Fan Siwen froze, and said, "You are not yet crowned, don't worry about it, Zijan will take part in the general examination next year. If he passes, there will be palace examination and Shujishi examination, and you will soon be a father now. When the time comes when you are crowned, I will discuss it with your father, and the two families will hold a wedding ceremony together. My uncle still remembers that when you were young, you often clamored to celebrate your birthday together. It happened that you were less than 2 months apart, so you both put it together." Chi Heiran didn't want the topic to be diverted, so he heard this and said, "Uncle, I know you think cousin Zijan is powerful and has the advantage over your son-in-law, so you should let cousin Xiao be more, so that you can have a bowl of water du and ping, but you have to know that for my concubine, serving your bowl of water is not fair. What's more, your bowl of water is always unfair." Chi Heiran waved his hand to prevent Fan Siwen from speaking, and said with a sullen face, "I know what you mean, it's nothing more than that cousin Zijan has the ability to become an official by himself, so you want to give the place of Anayan to cousin Xiao." Chi Heiran said, twitching the corners of his mouth. He said, "Cousin Zijan doesn't have to have the quota. Since my uncle has already made a decision in his heart, let's implement it as soon as possible. The quota will be reported early, and everyone's hearts will be at ease. He will participate in the spring next year Chunwei, it's better not to disturb him with these trivial matters at this time." Fan Siwen lowered his face, looked at Chi Heiran fixedly and asked, "Are you planning to meddle in the affairs of uncle's house?" "Uncle, you have been planning for cousin Xiao, but don't forget, you are not the only son of him, cousin Zijan is also your bloodline. Next year will be the most important year in his life." Before he was able to easily pass the country test because he had saved up for 5 years, and spent another year reviewing it, and now, there are only 4 months before next year's spring. Chi Heiran looked into his eyes firmly, he paused and said, "If my uncle doesn't feel bad at all, then Heiran doesn't mind intervening. He has protected me for 18 years, and I can afford to protect him for 4 months. Fan Siwen's face darkened, but he didn't speak. Chi Heiran put down the bowls and chopsticks, got up and left, stopped when he reached the door, and asked a little curiously, "Uncle, you are not only a bastard like cousin Xiao, since you want a bowl of water to be flat, what else should you do? What about the bastard?" Fan Siwen's face turned greener. Chi Heiran turned and left. He walked around the street, and finally rode his horse to Chen's house, Minister of Rights, and sat in the porter's room until Chen Qian arrived. Chen Qian was taken aback when he saw Chi Heiran, looked up at the sun, and said, "That's right, the sun sets from the west. What kind of wind brought you, a busy man, here today?" Chi Heiran rolled his eyes, pulled him to the Quanja building, and straight to the point as soon as he entered the box, "Are we brothers?" Chen Qian said in surprise, "I don't do anything wrong. Private matters, don't do evil." Chen Qian said cautiously, "If it's within my ability." Chi Heiran showed a big smile, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry about this, it's within your ability." Chi Heiran whispered a few words in his ear. Chen Qian nodded slightly, and said, "It's not difficult for my grandfather to write a letter of recommendation for Zijin, but it's not so easy to ask Chen Guangdi to be a teacher. I didn't want Zijin to worship him as a teacher, but I just wanted him to study with Mr. Chen for 4 months." Chen Qian glanced at him, and said, "4 months later, it will be Chunwei, which is no different from apprenticeship. My uncle is not so easy to talk to. So I have to ask you to do me another favor." Chi Heiran smiled flatteringly. After a while, a loud voice came from the box, "Don't even think about it." Half an hour later, Chi Heiran sent out the cold-eyed Chen Qian with a smile on his face, and the money manager brought up a big food box and said, "Mr. Chen, this is what Mr. Biao ordered earlier this morning. You didn't eat much food that was prepared for you, you just need to warm it up when you go back." Chen Qian's servant went to see his master. Chen Qian's expression turned even colder, he gave Chi Heiran a hard look, gritted his teeth and said, "Take it." "Now Chi Heiran will take what he gives," he snorted, climbed into the carriage, and then opened the curtain with a swish. His eyes were not eyes, his nose was not his nose, and said, "Everyone says how good Zijin treats you, I always protect you, but today it seems that you protect a lot. Heiran, remember what you said today, don't just turn around and forget it." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 478. Chen Guangdi is Chen Fang's younger brother, also from the Chen family. Although he does not serve as an official, his academic prestige is not inferior to Chen Fang's. Because he once served as the head of Songshan Academy in the south of the Yangtze River, although he is idle at home now, he has brought a few disciples studying together. Now Kuazijian Jiju, Zhou Shilang of the Ministry of Rites and several ministers in the court are all from his disciples, and most of the Jiangnan provincial examinations in recent years have been written by his students. It has something to do with him. Studying with Chen Guangdi, at least they can grasp some direction of review, which is a great opportunity for candidates. But Chen Guangdi is not so easy to follow. Fan Zijin asked the former master of the academy to recommend him for help, but he couldn't even meet Chen Guangdi. He followed Chen Qian and met twice, but Fan Zijin couldn't catch the other party's eyes. So I haven't been able to do so. Chen Qian felt that his uncle was glorious, but Chi Heiran didn't think so. He didn't understand any major principles, and he only recognized one point. It happens that they all come from official families and aristocratic families. Moreover, his disciples' backgrounds are not low. In his opinion, Fan Zijin is no worse than those of his disciples. In terms of knowledge, skills, character, and friendship with Chen Qian, Chen Guangdi could not let Chen Guangdi accept him as his own. It's nothing more than the fact that the Fan family's qualifications and power are not enough. Chi Heiran came to Chen Qian because he wanted to take a shortcut, and he didn't ask Chen Guangdi to accept Fan Zijin as his way, he just took him to study for 4 months with peace of mind, and he could still pay this price. After returning home, Chen Qian went to the study to find his grandfather. Seeing that he came back after it was dark outside, Chen Fang asked softly, "Did you go out with your colleagues today?" Chen Qian shook his head and said, "Grandfather, my grandson has something to ask you." When Chen Qian came out again, he took a letter in his hand. After thinking for a while, he walked towards his father's study, stopped at the gate of the courtyard, and asked, "Where is father inside?" The old servant guarding the gate bowed and said, "The uncle has already returned to the backyard. It would be fine if the young master asks the uncle to go to the backyard." Chen Qian nodded nonchalantly, frowned, and said, "I'm here to look for books, and I'm going to use them tonight. I thought my father was here." The old servant laughed and said, "Young master, if you want to find a book, just go in straight in, and when you turn around, this old slave will just tell you." Chen Qian smiled, "There's no need to trouble you, I just need to talk to my father when I go back to say hello to my mother, and you can open the door for me." Master Chen Qian is the youngest and promising youngest in the family. Not only the uncle, but also the master dotes on him very much. Although he was messing around a bit before, he has improved a lot since he was admitted to Jinshi, so he approached him without any doubts. "Open the study door." Chen Qian went in, asked the servant to watch outside, and lit up the lamp in the study by himself. Chen Qian went to the innermost corner with familiarity, where there was a big bookcase with Yulu's paintings on the top. Chen Qian gently moved the chair to the bottom and stepped on it. After groping on the cabinet, he opened a mechanism. He hurriedly took out a long box and opened it. There was a painting inside. Chen Qian didn't care. It touched the bottom of the box and pulled out a folded booklet wrapped in silk. He carefully opened it and saw that it was indeed the Sijong's admonition form put away by his father. Chen Qian narrowed his eyes with a smile. He wrapped the folder in cloth and stuffed it into his arms, put the box back and covered it, and then carefully moved the chair back to its original position. Chen Qian casually took a book and went out. The old servant didn't doubt at all, he locked the study room again with a smile, and watched the capable young master leave. The next day, Chen Qian also wanted to leave the mansion after his grandfather and father went to court. Chen Shu was very puzzled. "You don't have to go to court, why are you in such a hurry?" Chen Qian is now just a small official in charge of affairs, and he has nothing to do with going to court, and it's not yet time for the yamen to order. Chen Qian fooled around a few words and hurried to the meeting place agreed with Qi Heiran. He handed the things in his hand to Qi Heiran, and asked, "Heiran, brother, I risked the consequences of offending my father for you. But you must keep your word." Qi Heiran opened the silk bag and took a look, then said nonchalantly, "Don't worry, when will my words not count?" Even though he said so, Chen Qian was still terrified, and reassured, "Are you sure that the one in your elder brother's hand is the real one?" Qi Heiran rolled his eyes and said, "It is covered with a jade seal, do you think it is the real one? Chang'an was originally the capital of my great Zhou dynasty. When I fled south in a hurry, I didn't bring out many things from the palace. Emperor Sejong's admonishment table, it is estimated that it was left like that. The nobles of the kingdom of Jin who broke into Chang'an divided up their things. My elder brother rushed into Chang'an city, and more than half of the warehouse of the governor of Jingzhou mansion in the kingdom of Jin was emptied. I thought that all the things left were crooked melons and dates. Who knew that I could find this thing in a pile of garbage? Or you are lucky, okay?" Qi Heiran raised the silk bag in his hand and said, "The fake one can be exchanged for an authentic one." Chen Qian yelled at him, "Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand, what kind of fake? This is the famous Confucian translation of the Sejong dynasty, and it is said that it is exactly the same as Emperor Sejong's handwriting. If it wasn't for the jade seal stamped on the authentic work, this thing could be a fake. You also said it was false. But this is also something that is hard to come by. In order to grab this thing, my father fought with the old man from the third bedroom of Kui's family. Not only did he empty his private house, but he also embezzled my mother's dowry. Anyway, I risk it. It took a lot of risk to take it out. You must get it back for me, or my father will really kill me." Qi Heiran patted him on the shoulder and assured him, "Don't worry, I sent a letter to my elder brother Fij last night, he will receive the letter in a few days, and you only need half a month to receive it. It's real." Chen Qian was a little embarrassed. Although he knew he shouldn't ask, he still couldn't help asking, "Why did you think of using this to bribe my uncle? It is said that if you can get the authentic work, let alone let Zijin study with my uncle, just it's okay for my uncle to accept him as a disciple. This is the reason for his real uneasiness." Although Chi Heiran looks silly, but when it comes to Fan Zijin, he doesn't think he will make this mistake. Chi Heiran squinted at him. "You want to hear the truth?" Chen Qian nodded. Chi Heiran sighed and said, "I don't want Zijin to get too involved with the Chen family. Your uncle looks aloof, but I think he is more ambitious than your grandfather. If he worships your uncle as his teacher, I'm afraid it will trip him up. Let him live. Anyway, our purpose is just to pass the test. Why do we have to worship a master? They are going to do rebellious things in the future. Master and father, and things will be exposed in the future. With Chen Guangdi's status and character, he may come forward to suppress Zijin with his identity, but instead put Zijin on the cusp of the storm. Not an idiot, of course wouldn't do such a thing. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 479. What's more, it will take half a month for the original work to come here, and if you move it around, 20 days will pass, and you can learn a lot of knowledge in 20 days. Chen Qian looked at Chi Heiran, who was heartbroken, as if Chi Heiran was eager to learn. Besides, good things are naturally reserved for good brothers, right? Chi Heiran patted him on the shoulder and said. Chen Qian looked at Chi Heiran and said seriously, "Heiran, if you can really bring the original work, I will promise you one more request, as long as I can do it." Easy to say, easy to say. Chi Heiran rushed to Chen Guangdi's villa on the outskirts of the city with a letter of recommendation and a silk bag in his arms. Chi Heiran didn't hand over his own post, and directly handed Chen Fang's letter to his servant. He was quickly invited in. Chen Guangdi was playing the piano in a pavilion halfway up the mountain. Chi Heiran looked up at the sky. It was not long after the sun came out, and the October sky was already a little wet and cold. It's a feeling of coldness to the bone, how much perseverance it takes to get up early in the morning and run to the mountain to play the piano. But Chi Heiran still stepped forward respectfully and stood aside. After the song, Chen Guangdi looked up at Chi Heiran, frowned slightly and asked, "Which family are you from?" "Mr. Hui, I'm Chen Qian's classmate." Seeing Chen Guang's brow tightening, he hurriedly said, "But this time the kid is here for my cousin." Half an hour later, Chen Guangdi put down the folder in his hand, rubbed it reluctantly and said, "This thing is Qian's father's treasure. How did you get it?" Chi Heiran chuckled, and pointed to the channel. "The method is the same as that letter. It was all given by Chen Qian." Asked, "When did my cousin become so generous? And it seems that the cousin can't be the master of the nephew in this matter, right?" Chen Guangdi thought for a while and said, "The villa is very big, and some of my students will also participate in Chunwei next year. Let him move in and study with them tomorrow." Chi Heiran heaved a sigh of relief, and bowed in response. After Chi Heiran left, a middle-aged man with azure color turned out from behind the big rock, bowed and said, "Master, this thing is the treasure of Mr. Sheng, and even Mr. Sheng can't get his hands on it if he wants to see it." "How did you get it?" Chen Guangdi picked up the thing and said with a smile, "No matter how I got it, it's in my hands anyway. Don't spread this matter. I'll take a closer look at it when I go back tonight." Chi Heiran, who went down the mountain, ran back to claim credit with Fan Zijin and asked to help pack his luggage. Fan Zijin said in astonishment, "Why did Mr. Chen agree to guide me?" Chi Heiran proudly told him about his deal with Chen Qian. Fan Zijin's expression changed, he kicked him angrily, and shouted, "Then you just promised to give away such a precious thing, don't give it to me." He was so angry that he jumped around the room for a while, then circled around Chi Heiran non-stop, and finally couldn't help kicking him again, saying, "Do you know that is a priceless treasure? Do you know?" Chi Heiran dodged, staring, and said, "No matter how priceless a treasure is, it's just a collection. It can't be eaten or drunk. I really don't understand why you literati are so precious. Anyway, I'll give it away. You can just say you want to go to the villa or not. Fanzygen gritted his teeth, and finally fell down on the couch in distress, kept beating his feet and chest, and cried, "Why am I so stupid? I should have checked my elder brother's treasury back then, such a treasure, it was just wasted by you for nothing." Although Fanzygen was so sorry that he felt distressed, he finally asked Yanmo to pack up his things and move to the villa tomorrow, even with a somewhat aggressive face. Chi Heiran was scolded for a while, and sat on the side with his neck curled up. Fanzygen did a set of questions as if venting, but when he looked up, he found that he was still here, so he curled his lips and asked, "What are you still doing here? Do you want to take care of Aling?" "You think I want to be here?" Chi Heiran said a little discouraged. "I lied to her that I was going to court, and I promised her not to tell anyone about her pregnancy before she was diagnosed, but now that the city is full of trouble, how dare I go back?" Fanzygen squinted his eyes and asked, "Does that mean she still doesn't know what's going on outside?" Chi Heiran nodded. "I have issued an order that people are strictly prohibited from talking about outside news, and she doesn't leave the yard, so it shouldn't be a problem to keep her secret for a few days, but she will always go out in the future. I don't know if she will settle accounts after the fall." Fanzygen put down his pen, stood up and said, "Let's go, I'll go back to Chi Mansion with you. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Xiaobao for several days, and I still want to eat gourd chicken." Gourd chicken is a famous dish in Jingzhou Mansion, and the cook they brought from Jingzhou Mansion can cook it, so Chi Heiran had no doubts, and brought Fanzygen back to Chi Mansion. When Fanzygen saw Mu Yangling, he told Mu Yangling one by one about Chi Heiran's oolong in asking for leave and failing to report it. Chi Heiran roared, and was about to drag him out with Fanzygen in his arms, but Fanzygen clung to the door tightly, raised his head firmly and said, "Sister and sister, you must take good care of him and give him a serious blow lesson learned, so that he will not discuss anything with others in the future." Fanzygen burst into tears when he said this. Give away the priceless treasure like waste paper. Mu Yangling stared at the two of them dumbfounded, and finally closed his mouth slowly, turned his head to Lishun and said, "Didn't the kitchen fry chestnuts? Go and get them. Let's sit and watch the show." As soon as these words came out, Chi Heiran let go of his hand immediately, and ran over as soon as he threw Fanzygen, and said cautiously, "Aling, this is all the master's fault. At that time, I was so happy that I was dizzy. Forget everything. If you are angry, you can hit me or kick me, but you must not hold it in your heart. What if you spoil the child?" Mu Yangling opened his eyelids and glanced at him, and said, "Okay, I'm not angry. If I get angry about anything, I'd be mad at you long ago." She turned to look at Fanzygen. "How did you offend cousin Zygen?" Fanzygen snorted coldly, straightened his clothes, sat at the table and poured himself a cup of tea, and said, "He gave Chen Qian the Xizhong admonition table written by Emperor Xizhong himself, just to let me go to Chenguang. Studying and reviewing in the local villa. Chen Guangdi, the former head of Songshan Academy." Fanzygen nodded with a sullen face, and Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Isn't this a good thing? I heard that Chen Guangdi is very knowledgeable. Studying with him for 4 months is like studying for a year by yourself." "Well, that's Xizhong's table of admonitions." Mu Yangling said with doubts in his eyes, "Isn't that thing only valuable for collection? Anyway, there are admonishment tables in the book. Even if you get the original work, it will be left at home to be ashes. It can't be eaten or drunk. How can it be? Is it really useful to study with Mr. Chen?" Chi Heiran nodded repeatedly, and said with a confident, "That's right, that's right. The Reborn Wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 480. Fanzygen moved to Chen Guangdi's villa with an expression of "it's not that the family does not enter the family. Fan Siwen originally wanted to ease the relationship between the father and son under Chi Haeran's words, so he gave Fan Zijan some money, let him take it to manage. Fan Zijan was just a little taken aback and accepted all comers. He moved to the villa to study and do test papers with Chen Guangdi's students, almost isolated from the outside world, but sat down every 2 days to listen to Chen Guangdi's discussion of government affairs, and he could always get the latest news from the government. In this way, there is quite a feeling of sitting in a scholar's home and hearing about world affairs. When Fan Zijan went to the villa, Chi Haeran could stay at home with Mu Yangling at ease. Anyway, the matter had already been exposed, and he didn't have to get up early in the morning to pretend to go to court. 4 days later, Dr. Sun confirmed that Mu Yangling was indeed pregnant, and Chi Haeran immediately rewarded the whole house happily, wishing to grow a tail on his tail, so that everyone in the world would know. When the news spread to the Chi family, it was strange that many people sent messages to Mu Yang's spirit, or invited her out for a visit, or invited her to a banquet at home. Chi Haeran refused all of them, and said, "It's not been 3 months yet, and they're too ignorant, and are you familiar with them?" Chi Haeran picked out all the posts that could be directly rejected. Mu Yangling was drowsy on the couch. She had only shown signs of pregnancy in the past 2 days. She was sleeping and wanting to sleep for 10 of the 12 hours a day. Seeing that his wife was sleepy again, Chi Haeran really wanted to go forward and hug her to the bed, so Guyu hurried in. Fourth grandma, what a happy event." Mu Yangling woke up in an instant. Chi Haeran glared at Guyu shrank her neck, and stood aside obediently. Mu Yangling leaned on Chi Haeran and asked, "What happy event?" Guyu immediately laughed, "Master Uncle and the others are here." Mu Yangling was stunned for a while before realizing who the uncle she was talking about was. She widened her eyes and said, "Bowen is here? Who did he come with?" Guyu said happily, "Master Uncle, Mr. Liu and young Master Biao Miss came together, and now they are outside the gate of the house." Chi Haeran also widened his eyes, "Why didn't they notify us before they came, so that we could pick them up?" Chi Haeran put a cloak on Mu Yangling, and the two hurried to the gate of Chi Mansion. Bowen and the others were sitting in the carriage, looking at the Chi Mansion's plaque with concern. "Do you think my sister will be bullied?" Ziyuheng raised her eyebrows and said, "Who dares to bully my cousin?" Lu Lang patted her hand, "There are many dignitaries in the capital, you should restrain your temper and don't cause trouble for Aling." Ziyuheng let out a hum. When Mr. Zhao saw him, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, Ms. Mu is a smart and wise person, and she has a strong backbone, so she won't be easily bullied." As soon as the words fell, the door of the Chi Mansion opened slowly. Chi Haeran and Mu Yangling stood side by side on the steps. Bowen cheered in a low voice, and jumped out of the car curtain at once. Mu Yangling grabbed Bowen, who was rushing over, touched his head, and said with a smile, "That's right, I've grown a lot taller." Lu Lang and Ziyuheng also stepped forward to pay respects, and Chi Haeran went to greet Mr. Liu. "Mr. Liu has worked hard all the way, let's go to the mansion first." Because of the special relationship between the East and West mansions, Chi Haeran asked people to ask Wu when she had time, and if she had time to see someone from Mu Yangling's natal family, so he took him back to Zayahua courtyard. "Why did you come to the capital?" Mu Yangling pulled Ziyuheng and Bowen and asked. "Sister, my husband is going to participate in next year's spring festival. First, I wanted to come out to see the world, and second, I also wanted to see you, so we followed." Mu Yangling touched his head and said, "You are still young, there is nothing wrong with coming out to see the world, but you must keep your heart and don't be fooled by the outside world. Remember, reading and learning knowledge is your responsibility, the #1 priority right now. Sister, don't worry. Although I'm away from home, I haven't left my textbooks. If you don't believe me, ask Mr. I have been studying." Ziyuheng also nodded. Bowen worked very hard. Mu Yangling frowned slightly. Are you reading in the carriage? Didn't you say you can't read on it, it will damage your eyes? No, I study in the morning and evening. If I get bored in the car, my husband will ask me to recite the book and ask me to answer some questions. The husband also said that although I have only been away for a month, my progress is no less than that at home. This is the second time Bowen has praised himself. Mu Yangling touched his head amusedly and boasted, Bowen is more powerful than my sister imagined. Mu Bowen puffed out his chest proudly. After all, he was just an 11-year-old child. After Mu Yangling asked about the blog post, she looked at Ziyuheng, saw that she had combed the woman's hair, took a look at Lu Lang, and then dragged the two of them to her main room to talk, leaving the flower hall for Qi Heiran to entertain Lu Lang and Mr. Lu. Ziyuheng, are you married? Ziyuheng blushed and nodded, shyly said, I married cousin Lu Lang. Why didn't you tell me? Mu Yangling complained slightly, obviously there was a correspondence every month. We set off right after we got married. The blog post said we would give you a surprise, so we didn't allow our family to tell you. How is it, cousin, did you get any surprises? Mu Yangling nodded their foreheads, you guys are too courageous. You dare to go on the road with only such a few people. Now the world is not peaceful and bandits are everywhere. At that time, I didn't want you to follow me to the south. That's it. The reason is that the way back was too far away and too dangerous, so you ended up running here by yourself. Didn't Mr. Lu take us? Ziyuheng hugged Mu Yangling's arm and said, my cousin also arranged 8 guards for us, which is not too small. We didn't have any accidents along the way. It's best not to have an accident, but if there is an accident on the road, it will be a big event, and there will be no luck. Mu Yangling gave them a lesson. She doesn't mind if they go out to gain knowledge, but it also depends on where they are. Xingzhou Mansion, Hanzhong Mansion, and Jingzhou Mansion are fine. These 3 places are under Qi Ziyuan's control. Going south after Xingzhou Mansion, there is no particularly stable area. 8 guards may seem like a lot to ordinary people, but they can't even hear a single sound in front of hundreds of bandits. It was in front of Mr. Lu before, and she didn't want to give him the impression that she was too restrictive, so she could only bring him back and teach him a lesson alone. If something happens to you, what will you do if you call your aunt, father, mother, and younger brothers and sisters? Bowen and Ziyuheng lowered their heads. Li Shun entered the door and said with a smile, 4th Grandma, MRSCAI sent someone to pass the message that you haven't seen your natal family for a long time, so you should talk to your natal family more. She is not feeling well these days, so she won't see her uncle and young lady. Well, see you later when you have free time. Mu Yangling nodded, waved his hand nonchalantly and said, understood, you go down and clean up the room for Mr. Lu and uncle and young master. They will stay here first tonight. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 481. Mu Yangling didn't let them live in Qi Mansion for too long. Living here is not as comfortable as living outside, so she asked someone to clean up the small courtyard on Qixia Street the next day, and asked them to leave the house on the 3rd day. Moved over. As soon as Fan Zijian came back, he bought a big yard on Qixia Street, where his business and dark news were passed on. After Mu Yangling took over his business in Jiangnan, he bought a small yard next door for easy communication. After all, there were strangers coming in and out next door, so it was inconvenient for Mu Yangling to deal with things there. Now it is much more convenient for Mr. Lu and the others to move to the small courtyard. Just move the things in her study to the next door, and just buy some household things. After making all these arrangements, Mr. Lu will study at ease, and from time to time, he will go to tea houses where scholars gather to meet friends with literature. Fan Zijian will give him some test papers and reference answers when he takes a half-monthly rest. These things are hard to find, and Mr. Liu is very grateful. Chi Heiran felt that Fan Zijian was too kind to Mr. Liu, so he asked Fan Zijian if he was planning some bad idea again. Fan Zijian smiled and said, Mr. Liu is not bad, and his character is not bad. He worked with Aling before. How do you say that I completely turned him into a big brother? Chi Heiran thought for a while and said, let's be cautious. Don't worry, I will grasp the rhythm. By the way, is the original work here? Fan Zijian looked at Chi Heiran with piercing eyes. Not yet, but it's only been 2 days. Fan Zijian rolled his eyes, lowered his voice and said, you said if I replaced it with a fake one. Is there any counterfeit that can hide from the Chen family? Chi Heiran asked curiously. Fan Zijian was choked for a moment, and said quietly, then it will be said that what the elder brother got is a fake, and you don't understand antiques, so it is understandable to get a fake. Chi Heiran jumped up and shouted, no, is the master the kind of villain who cheats on chickens and dogs? You're not, I'm okay with it, Fan Zijian roared back, as long as I can leave the original work, I'll take the blame. Chi Heiran's face turned red, isn't it just a piece of cake, you need to grab it like this, except for that thing, tell me, if you want anything else, I'll find it for you. Fan Zijian raised his eyelids and gave him a disgusted look, and said, you can't even see the value of good things, can you know how to tell the truth from the fake? I said I want the picture of the sage and worthy Lao Tzu, can you find it for me? The picture of the sage Lao Tzu, Chi Heiran tilted his head, the one drawn by Zhou Yao. Fan Zijian sat cross-legged on the kong, took a sip of tea, and snorted coldly, this is the one. It has been lost since Emperor Jiaozong. Can you find it for me? If you can find it, give the Chen family 10 letters of authenticity. I will not bother to hold back the Xizhong's admonition table. Chi Heiran held his head in distress and said, this thing is so familiar, I seem to have seen it before. Fan Zijian froze, quickly put down the tea in his hand, and looked at Chi Heiran anxiously, I'm in charge of all your trophies, did you see them at the elder brother's place? Think about it carefully. Chi Heiran frowned and thought about it carefully, but he couldn't think of it for a long time. Fan Zijian couldn't help kicking him in anger, thinking that Chi Heiran was lying to him, so that he would not be entangled in the matter of Xizhong's admonition table. In the end, Fan Zijian left angrily. Chi Heiran frowned and went home. He felt that he had seen this thing before, but he was not impressed at all. Seeing that his brows were all drawn together, Mu Yangling asked, what's wrong with you? I'm thinking of sage and worthy Lao Tzu picture. Mu Yangling blinked and asked, what do you want it to do? I always think I've seen it somewhere, but why can't I remember it? Mu Yangling coughed lightly, and said, isn't that the dowry you gave me, and then I moved it into the warehouse as a dowry? Why are you asking this? Chi Heiran opened his mouth wide, and finally remembered that when he was choosing the dowry for Mu Yangling, he almost emptied his elder brother's warehouse, and although he put the things back in the end, his elder brother later returned from that share. A large piece was ticked on the gift list, and sage and worthy Lao Tzu picture was among them. Chi Heiran swallowed his saliva and asked, is that the real work? It should be real. Mu Yangling was not very sure, they were all snatched from the rich and powerful of the kingdom of Jin. They wouldn't collect fake ones, would they? Chi Heiran rubbed his chin and felt that the possibility of the authentic work was relatively high. He looked at Mu Yangling with a smile. Mu Yangling waved his hand and pushed away the face that was in front of him, and said, speak up if you have something to say, don't try to get close. Chi Heiran rubbed his nose and said, Aling, let's give that thing to Zijian. He's going crazy thinking about the admonition form now, and he doesn't know if it will affect his mood during the exam. Mu Yangling said indifferently, it's okay, but the things are in Jingzhou Mansion. She is not very obsessed with antiques. In her opinion, as long as these things don't go abroad, they are probably better in anyone's hands than hers, because they love them, and although she likes them, they haven't arrived yet. At the point of love, the antique is in her hands, and she can only know its value when it is converted into money. Chi-Heiran obviously thought so too, and immediately went to write a letter to Fan Zijian happily, telling him the good news, but he also said in advance that this thing was snatched back from the Golden Man, and the authenticity has not yet been confirmed. Then let Fei Bai deliver the letter to the villa. But at this time, there was a loud shout in the study of the old man of the Chen family. Chen Sheng ran out with disheveled hair and bare feet. An angry voice said, "Say, who has entered Grandpa's study?" As soon as Chen Qian entered the door, he was grabbed by the arms of two servants and sent all the way to Chen Fang's study. He knew that something was wrong. When Chen Sheng saw his son, he rushed forward as if seeing an enemy, and raised his hand to strike him down, when he heard his son screaming, "Father, I am your son." Chen Qian burst into tears, and Chen Sheng couldn't let go of his raised hand. In the end, he could only turn the man around, kick his ass, and cursed, "Are you my son? You are my enemy. Are you my son, come to collect debts from Lao Tzu? Why did I give birth to such a prodigal son like you? Who told you to steal from Lao Tzu? I will kill him, kill him." Chen Qian honestly lay on the ground with his butt pouted. Now he just kicked his butt. Anyway, his father didn't want to use force, so just kick it. Chen Sheng beat him for a long time, and saw that his son was just howling, showing no sign of admitting his mistake, so he ran around the room angrily, and finally grabbed a feather duster and gesticulated on his back twice, but finally he was still reluctant, so he could only raise his hand. The hand crackled and hit it, and Chen Qian screamed. In the end, Chen Qian didn't feel much pain, but Chen Sheng's hand was swollen from the beating. He sat down on the ground and saw that his son didn't say where his things went. Feeling sad for a moment, he turned around and crawled over to hug the old father's leg and cried, "Father, you have to decide for your son. Look at your grandson, this is digging my heart." Chen Fang looked at his son with contempt, and he was willing to embarrass his son rather than beat him. Frightened by his father's loud cries, Chen Qian hurriedly climbed up on his knees and said, "Father, I haven't lost anything, my son just traded it for something." "Prodigal son, can you exchange that thing? Tell me, which bastard fooled you?" The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 482. Chen Fang raised his eyes slightly, looked at his grandson, and said calmly, "Tell me, do you really have to wait for your father to start the family law?" Chen Qian got up, sat on the ground and cried, "Father, my son is really all for your own good." Seeing that his father was so angry that his nose was about to crooked, he quickly said, "Father, Chi-Heiran said that he has Zhang's the authentic one, he has always been trustworthy, you just have to wait 2 more days, and he will definitely be able to deliver the authentic one to our family." Chen Sheng looked at his son with hatred for being weak. He was obviously very smart, how could he be a fool? Who would exchange Zhang's authentic work for a copy? The son didn't believe it at first, but didn't he ask his son for something, and the son agreed to him, and he will make another request later. Seeing that Chen Sheng's expression softened, he immediately said, "Father, next month is yours on your 40th birthday, my son just wanted to give you a surprise, so he secretly stole that thing from you." When Chen Sheng heard this, the anger that had just been suppressed burst into flames again. "Are you surprising me? It was a fright, and it almost scared me to death. You explained the matter clearly to me from the beginning to the end." Hearing that the thing was in Tang Shu's hands, Chen Sheng said to his father displeased, "Father, why did Tang Shu not say a word when he got this treasure? If he had said it earlier, why would I be so angry?" Chen Fang glanced at him, and said, "He probably guessed that the child stole it, so he can keep it from day to day." Chen Sheng snorted displeasedly, turned his head and asked his son, Are you sure that Chi Heiran has the real thing on him? What if he lied to you? If the thing is in your uncle's hands, we don't want to get it back. Chen Qian swore, if you say that Fan Zijin lied to me, I will believe it, but I don't believe Chi Heiran, he never lied to anyone. Chen Shen was still worried, but Chen Fang said, the fact that Chi Heiran has the original handwriting is probably true. I heard that he has a very close relationship with that child from the Fan family. Since he is studying for his cousin, naturally he will not deceive him with such a thing. People. Chen Cheng relaxed slightly, and Chen Fang said again, what's more, Hanshong Mansion and Jingzhou Mansion were taken back by the Qi brothers. Don't forget, Chang'an used to be the capital city. Back then we fled south in a panic and lost many ancestors' treasures. Baby, since they took back the Jingzhou Mansion, they can always grab some back. Speaking of this, Chen Fang had a sad face. Those warriors only love gold and silver, and don't like calligraphy and painting. I don't know if they will spoil good things. Those old things still have to stay in the hands of the aristocrats to play their own value. Chen Fang and Chen Sheng looked at Chen Qian with piercing eyes. You have a good personal relationship with Chi Heiran, you can find out what good things he has there, we are willing to exchange them with them. Chen Qian wiped away his tears, shook his head and said, Grandfather, father, don't even think about such a good thing. Why did we coax him out as soon as Chi Heiran came back? It's not because of the things in his hand, but all the things he snatched back were given to Fan Zijin, and they were all placed in Jingzhou Mansion, not to mention us, even his father, don't even want to get involved. I'm afraid he doesn't know how many good things he has in his hands. Let him take care of it. It is completely impossible for us to get good things without bleeding. He is more shrewd than a profiteer. You want good things, give me the silver, and I'll exchange it for you. Although Fan Zijin is stingy, they need a lot of money to do business now, and they are happy to exchange it. Chen Qian looked at them eagerly. The father and son stopped talking for a while. Although the Chen family has a big business, they really don't have much cash. Otherwise, Chen Shen would not have emptied his own pockets and embezzled his wife's dowry just to buy a booklet. Chen Fang touched his nose, unable to do anything to deceive, could only shake his head and sigh regretfully. Seeing that there were only 3 people in the room, Chen Qian asked in a low voice, Grandfather, is what Chi Heiran said about my uncle right or wrong? I thought that even if this thing was sent to my uncle would return it even if he was moved. Come back, after all, a gentleman treats others with sincerity and does not take what others like. Chen Cheng sneered, got up from the ground, kicked his son's ass with his toes, and said, you are said to be smart, but you are not even as good as a martial artist. You should sharpen your skills and learn how to look at people, that uncle of yours. Shut up, do you criticize your elders and teach your descendants so much? Chen Fang shouted at him, then turned to Chen Qian and said, Chi Heiran is full of hostility, I'm afraid he often goes to the battlefield. Don't underestimate him just because he is a martial artist. The intuition of people on the battlefield is particularly sharp, even if they are inferior to you in government affairs and interpersonal relationships. I am afraid that he is not inferior to you in distinguishing people's hearts, which cannot be learned by studying. So, the uncle he has always admired is the hypocrite that Chi Heiran said. How embarrassing is this for Chen Qian, who has revered his uncle for 18 years. Chen Fang didn't seem to see his grandson's pale face, and continued, although your uncle has some utilitarianism, the hustle and bustle in this world is all for profit, so you can't blame him. Having said this, Chen Fang felt that he was a bit reluctant, and couldn't help but sigh. One sound. Chen Qian lowered his head sadly, and Chen Cheng suddenly yelled, you still have the heart to think about your uncle, go to Chi's house and take care of it right away, and bring it back to me as soon as it arrives. I tell you, if you can't get it back, it's really yes, don't come back either. The sad atmosphere in the room suddenly smiled. Chen Qian sniffed, feeling that the chill just now was completely an illusion, and now there is nothing more important than dealing with the old man. Chen Qian crawled out of Chen's house and was transported to Qi's mansion. He stayed at Qi's house and did not leave. In order to show his father his determination, Chen Qian asked for leave from the yamen and died in Qi's mansion. The gate was closed. "Do not step out of the second door." Qi Heiran said with a headache, "I will not short your things." Chen Qian knew that he disliked him for wasting his time with his wife, so he rolled his eyes when he heard this, and uttered 2 words, "wife-slave." Qi Heiran snorted, "If you piss me off, I'll send a letter to someone to rest on the road for 2 more days. It's been a hard journey for them all the way south." Chen Qian immediately stopped talking. Qi Heiran sent a postcard this time, and he sent it directly to Qi Ziyuan, so Qi Ziyuan received it very quickly. He threw the letter to Director Zhu and asked him to find the things in the warehouse and send them to Linen City with 2 guards. It was only then that Rongxian knew that Qi Heiran had such good things, and he coveted it, but he was no longer greedy when he thought about the things he got. These things were indeed very valuable in the prosperous age, and now they are hard to find, but if he is really willing to spend, those who come from rich gold rarely buy them, because this is a troubled time, and these things are only antiques with collection value and appreciation value. Rongxian said with a smile, "If you were in a prosperous age, you 2 brothers would be able to dominate one side and benefit your children and grandchildren just by relying on these things." Qi Ziyuan said indifferently, "If we were in the prosperous age, our brothers would not have a chance to get these things. Also, in a prosperous age, without war, these things would only stay in the treasury of the clan and the powerful."